Six Stages Gaming is brought to you by GamersGauntlet.net. Check them out for all your singles, sealed product, and playmats.
Alright guys, welcome and good evening. Today we're going to talk about this wonderful guy. Now there's been a lot of talk about how good this card is, and some people already calling that it should be banned, which I just don't agree with. But what I want to do in this video is take a minute to describe why Minwu is good and help you guys play around it. Now you'll learn that some elements have a lot easier time than others on how to deal with it, but at least you can come back to this video, and if someone's playing Minwu in your local meta, or that's just really you can't figure out ways to get it, I'm going to list every card, and hopefully I didn't miss one, every card in here for each element that has a response to it. Now I will admit some of these are better than others, it's just how it is. I can't do anything about it, but it gives us an option, and it really does help you kind of get an idea of what the meta is going to look like. Because again, I playtested with this card. If you saw our video yesterday, our dual series video where we played the Final Fantasy VII Rush deck versus the Final Fantasy X combo deck, this card won the game hands down, not even close. So let's talk about who Minwu is, the white mage that was. White mage? Pretty sure white mage. And then let's talk about some cards that help us beat it. So we have Minwu himself. It's a 3-drop, so it's a very good casting cost card. 3 crystal points generally means we're playing it on turn 2. So then turns 3 and 4, depending on the guys that we're playing, we're going to take a couple early points of damage, but that's fine, because if we have Minwu on turn 2 and then like a 9k on turn 3, we'll see that that's kind of hard to interact with. So forwards you control do not receive damage that is less than their power, which means you need to deal lethal, being it exactly the same or greater than what their power is. Now, again, keeping in mind, barring, let's say, combat tricks like Golem, if you buff something with Kefka, there's a few other options, but printed stats, the highest you can go is 9k, and reasonably to assume if decks are playing Minwu, they're going to be playing Maria as well, or at least I think that Wind Water is the best combination for right now. That could change. But chances are they're going to be playing some backup which can push them up to 10,000 potentially. So that's kind of the number that we need to be looking at. Kind of 10,000 power or a break effect or a way to answer Minwu. So I'm just going to run through the elements, talk about the cards themselves, and really get an idea of how we can combat this so people don't end up rage quitting, if you will, whenever they see this. So up first, as soon as this lets me go over, we're going to talk about fire. Now, keeping in mind, you don't always need to break what your opponent is doing. Sometimes you can just power through it, so that is going to be a key thing. Now, again, I will admit this isn't a direct answer to Minwu, but this is an answer to the forwards that they're going to be playing, and as I found out in some of our playtesting sessions, is Garland is a very, very hard forward to block. When he attacks, he gains plus 4,000 power. That's going to bump him up to 12k. And again, I just mentioned 10k is kind of about the max that you're going to see unless they have Golem, which can give him plus 4k on defense. So yeah, that's a little annoying. But outside of that, Garland is generally going to be hitting through the Minwu-based decks, especially if they're water heavy, which water forwards seem to be a little bit underpowered, but their effects are stronger. So that's something to keep in mind. But Garland is definitely a way to help punch through. So again, some of these aren't going to be direct ways to answer Minwu, but there are other cards that you should then think about playing if you can't destroy Minwu itself, which not every element can. Up next, we have Jet. For each forward opponent controls, he gains plus 1,000 power. Now this in itself, I want to kind of take a moment to call out. If you watched our Final Fantasy X video, or the deck profile, or the dual series that we put up on it, that deck really heavily requires you to kind of combo into like a Riku Pain Tita's plan. So with that considered, Jet is going to come in at 11,000, which is already going to be bigger than their Titus. Now again, yes, they could play around it. They could just kind of attack into their own guys, and obviously you wouldn't want to take the damage, so then you have to block them, but at least you're getting a couple of them off the board. So it is kind of this, that first part is, it makes your opponent have to think about it instead of just being like, oh, I have the largest creature on board. I don't have to worry about it, which is what I got to do while playing the Final Fantasy X starter. But again, the common theme that you will see now is his ability, the ultimate Jet Shot. Special, so you have to discard another one of him, which that is a little rough to do, but keep in mind if you play, let's say, Fire Wind, you then have Brother and can tutor up another copy of him. Choose one forward and break it. So let's say that your opponent is playing Minwu and they get up a big wall. You can then play Jet, play Jet, play Brother, tutor up a copy, and break whatever forward that they're playing. Again, this one you might only get off once or twice in a game, so hopefully it's going to be the ones that you really needed to, and you really are focusing on what are the key threats in their deck. But then again, his first ability just comes into hand so well, because even if they play one forward, it has to be a 9k, and then you're matching. And again, keeping in mind, you yourself, if you're playing a mono fire deck, let's say, there are backups that give you plus 1,000 power, so you can easily match them. So turns out this card might be seeing more play if we see a lot of Minwu base decks in your local meta. All right, now I will say, when I was going through this, I want to pick every card, especially some of those are kind of fringe, and this one is definitely it. Bahamut is very, very high costed at 9. Now, again, keeping in mind that you can run Fang, who will reduce it to 7. She's a little unimpressive herself, but that's an option. But what's good about this is you can choose up to 2 forwards and deal 10,000 damage to them. And I kind of mentioned that 10,000 is really the special number for the Minwu base decks, or at least again in my practice, because I've been playing Minwu and Maria, so the wind-water kind of combination, and it's very easy to have a 10k forward in that deck. So if you can deal 10k, that's where you want to kind of start looking at those cards. Another thing to note here is that when they're put into the field from the break zone this turn, you remove them from the game instead. Now, I think the only card that this is going to reference that's going to be relevant is, or at least that we've talked about recently, is the 6-drop Tidus, because if you control a forward Yuna, and she gets broken, then you draw 2 cards. So if they go from break zone to field to break zone specifically. So if they kind of get removed instead, then they don't get that effect. Now I know there's some other cards that will get effects when they go from field to break zone. Golbez, the Emperor. There's a few other ones. So being able to have a spell that's going to just remove them and they don't get those special effects, especially if we see Golbez getting a lot of play out of nowhere. Bahamut can definitely do some work, and as you'll see later in this video, there are a few other cards that have that. So that's kind of like a background thought to keep in mind. Those cards can definitely come out and help us. I will say I am very, very sorry if you're an Ice fan. Hades is kind of the only, I don't even want to call it an answer. It's something. So choose 1 forward and 1 backup. You dull the forward and you bounce the backup to their owner's hand. Your opponent then discards 1 card. So in theory, let's say your opponent plays out their hand, and especially in late game where you're going to be playing this card and where this card is undoubtedly the best that it is anyways, your opponent's going to have no cards in hand. You're going to be able to dull one of their forwards, yay. But then you get to bounce Minwu back to their hand, and because it's the only card that they'll have in their hand at that time, they'll then discard it. Now this one, again, I want to at least highlight that it's possible. This definitely takes a little bit more work, and I want to pull out something for Ice, because this is literally all they have. So Hades, if you're playing like the more mid-range or slow kind of decks, which tempo snow, or the 1-drop snow, is tempo based, but everything else seems to be more the control, tap your dudes down, survive a couple extra turns kind of plan. Hades can really shine in those matchups. But again, unless you're playing mono Ice, you are going to have other elements which have arguably significantly better options, but Hades is still viable, and I think it's worth playing as a 1 or 2 of in any Ice deck, especially if you have the room for it. So keep that in mind, as cards, there's always going to be a couple good summons you can use in Ice. Again, kind of moving on to the more, maybe a little bit fringe, but at least it's still an answer. Anytime you have a spell, ability, or forward, what have you, that says break something on it, you need to take a look at it. Alexander has been a bit underwhelming ultimately, simply because you have to choose a forward that costs 5 or more. Now again, Light Cloud is at 4. The good Lightning is at 6, so that's something that you can hit. But we've been finding Tidus is another just very, very strong 4 Crystal Point drop in this game. So Alexander doesn't exactly hit as much as you would hope it does right now, but I think as the meta progresses, and depending on how some decks develop, this can be a very strong card. So again, it doesn't directly interact with Minwu, but it can break some of their forwards, and it can kind of push through for those extra turns that you need. So again, I want to stress one more time, this video is going to address all the angles that you can attack these Minwu-based decks. because not every element has a direct deal with Minwu the card itself. So we really have to open up the options and think about the different things that we can be doing. Now, cards that can deal with Minwu. Archer. 2 green, tap, break your Archer, choose one backup of 3 or less, and break it. The thing I will point out with this one, though, is if they're very heavy in water, and I don't like going this deep, but people certainly will try it. There's a card called Yag, I believe it is, that if your opponent plays a spell that targets one of your backups, it must target him. Now, he's a 2-drop as well, so Archer must target him first if they have both on field. A card you'll see later, Bike, or Hecticon Chair, I think is how you pronounce it. I'm terrible. It's going to be Bike. That's another card, but it can't choose Yag, so it can only hit Minwu. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But Archer, if you've watched our Titus combo video, or if you just had the opportunity to check it out, we absolutely think that this card is going to be a 3 of in every single deck that plays Wind. The card is just that good. So if you're playing Wind, you definitely kind of have that one up that you naturally have Archer, which is one of the best backup-based removal that we currently have. I mean, it's one of 3 cards. And in my opinion, outside of Sephiroth, if we were looking at this versus Bike, I think Archer is better because it can also hit the 2-drop fire red mage, who says one of your forwards can't block, and that's been a very difficult card to deal with because the way the game goes, and if you put all your, you dump a couple of cards into, let's say, a 4 or 5 drop, 4 or 5 forward guy, then they can just go, oh, that can't block, and then they're going to be able to get into those extra points of damage. So Archer definitely comes through on multiple levels and is a card that, again, if you're playing Wind, play 3, it is that good. Moving on to Earth, we again see this kind of theme of these are the forwards, and we can't always beat them in being able to remove them with break effects. We can't always worry about Minwu. What are some of the other cards that we have? What are some great opportunities that other elements have? So I wanted to really kind of widen the scope and focus on these. And Gabranth really does that well. He is a 6 cost, which is a little high, 8k forward, good spot to be, but for each point of damage that you've received, Gabranth gains plus 1,000 power. So again, keep in mind I mentioned that 10k is kind of that upper limit, so if you take 3 points of damage, you're at 11k forward. That is going to be able to wall off your opponent in the Minwu based decks. Now again, they can remove it with Alexander, maybe they have removal, maybe they have Leviathan. Put all that aside for a moment. He is at least able to have an answer in Earth. And you'll see that Earth has quite a few options to break the Minwu decks, or to break up their lock, if you will, and attack it a couple different ways. But what's awesome about Gabranth as well is if you're at 6 points of damage, which again is not a good spot to be, because you're 1 point away from losing, but he gets a special effect. He gains Brave. So then you have a 14,000 forward that has Brave, so he doesn't have to dull anymore. So he can just sit there and go poke, 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 and can be really, really good. Now, again, he's only probably going to block 2 things on the defense then, if we want to think about it that way. But at least he's taking some forwards with him. So I think Gabranth definitely gets kind of an honorable mention here in terms of more cards that can interact with it. This one was a little bit I was torn on including Kefka or not, strictly because you have to lose a guy in the process as well. Kind of the mentality for adding it, though, is based on how that block was going to go, or maybe you're attacking or trying to push through damage, you're going to lose that forward anyways, so at least this is a way to threaten either if you're blocking to kind of trade off one of your lower guys into their higher guys, because plus 5,000 power is an insane amount, and that can really push the combat in your favor. But even if you're attacking and maybe you're playing like a Tifa or something that is very underwhelming kind of a late game, but if you can suddenly push Tifa up to 9k and they decide to block, chances are they're going to be losing their guy in the process as well. Again, I'm not saying play 3 Kefka in a deck. I'm just saying if you're playing Earth, if you're playing a more aggressive deck, it might be worth playing a 1 or 2 of, just because it gives you that kind of if you're going up against a water deck, they will likely be playing Minwu, and if they're not, they probably should be. Kefka gives you that little bit of extra punch that your forwards would need to kind of break through combat damage. So again, I was a little torn because you have to lose your own guy when you consider it, but at least it's giving you an option to push through for that extra damage. Shantoto is just, I love this card. I absolutely love this card. Cannot wait until we get to brewing and I have physical cards in my hand and I can build a 3-color deck. When she enters a field, remove all forwards. They're just gone. And also, kind of as we mentioned with Bahamut, they're then removed from the game. So they don't get to go to the break zone effect. So no Golbez, no the Emperor, whatever the other cards are that will tutor up more copies. You don't get those effects. Um, it's a little high costed at 7. If I'm not mistaken, they actually bumped this up from a 6 to a 7 drop just because of how good it is. And it also taps for multiple elements. So let's say your opponent builds out this combo and they've really built this wall up with forwards and Minwu that's kind of protecting them. You can just play Shantoto and be like, all right, all your forwards are gone. I don't have to deal damage to them because this card's going to break them all. And guess what? You can't really respond to it. Well, I guess you have like a Leviathan, you can bounce it one of your guys to your hand, but it's going to push the tide in your favor. And especially if you can follow this up with something that's going to be able to put pressure on them again, or at least on the very next turn you can put pressure on them, it's going to help restabilize the board in your favor. Now, again, that trick might only work once, or maybe your opponent is expecting it, but chances are if they're playing Minwu, they're going to be putting out a forward that's going to try to wall off your deck. So they're going to want to put out a 9K or an 8K or a 9K to kind of stop your aggressive pushing. So Shantoto can really help break that up and break up their defenses and kind of reset the board back to parity. So it's great to have that option. And again, Earth really hands down, I think, is the best anti-Minwu element, if you will, at least with set 1. Kind of going back to the theme of breaking your forwards in combat, we have Delita. So this card is just worth mentioning on a couple different things. It's an undercosted 9K, so 9K, great spot to be. And then if you're playing, let's say, a mono Earth deck, you can easily play the backup that gives all your Earth forwards plus 1,000, pushes them to a 10K, and that's 100% where you need to be. But also, he has the North Swain's Strike. Choose a forward blocking him and break it. So this card just wants to be aggressive. It wants to get up in your face and it wants to say, hey, I'm going to keep poking you for this damage. And even if you try to block me with one of your guys, if I have another one in hand, boom, discard it, pay 1 Earth, it's gone. The good thing is Delita has 2 versions of him, so you get to have the 3-drop, which is this version, and 2-drop, which is kind of unimpressive, but it gives you more copies of him to use the special on. So that's it's great that we have a card that can break forwards like that and combat these Minwu decks that also has more than 3 copies of it. Because like Jet that we saw, he does have a tutor, which is nice, but unless you have multiple cards to discard for him, you might only be using that ability once, maybe twice in a game, and it's not going to do enough for you. Where Delita, you play 1, you have 5 more copies in the deck. Chances are you're going to be getting off multiple times, depending on how the course of the game goes. So that's definitely something very, very strong that he has going for him. Moving on to another card, and this card is a spicy one. Prishy is an amazing card, offensively and defensively. So whenever she blocks, she gains plus 4,000 power. So even without a Minwu based deck, and she really does shine well in a water earth deck where she just keeps getting power every turn, and she can just wall off forever, but she has a 5-drop, so she dies to Alexander. She has the ability to give Brave, so she can also attack. So again, 8K, pretty good. But then she has the uppercut ability where she can double her power. So you can kind of trick your opponent into playing, thinking that they're going to have a good block, and then you can double her power. Or again, if you just want to be on defense, she gets plus 4,000 power every time you block. So you can definitely block quite a few things before she goes down. Now, again, if your opponent plays like 9K, 9K, then you can block both of them and then kind of do a 2-for-1 trade. But she really can help put up a defensive barrier, and she's also very, very good at attacking. So again, this one is a bit more defensive based than perhaps some of the other forwards I've kind of selected to call out are. But I think the ability that she can gain Brave is something absolutely worth mentioning, simply because it gives her the option to be defensive. And again, when she has such a strong defensive ability and she has a special which she can use if needed offensively, I 100% felt that this card was worth mentioning. So again, perhaps one of the weaker in terms of being able to either answer Minwu or answer their forwards, but it is also just an overall great card I thought was worth mentioning. Hekaton Chair, and again, probably butchering that. I'm sorry. I'm calling it Bike. That's just the name I've given it. Choose one backup of cost 3 or more and break it. 100%, here's your answer. Here's the number 1 card. if you're playing Earth, unless you're playing some hyper aggressive deck, you are playing 3 of this card. Again, there's just so many backups that are so important in this game. And this just kind of hits all the right ones. Now, again, it doesn't hit Cosmos or Chaos, so you can't shut them off of color fixing. You can't hit Red Mage, so you still have to worry about blocking. But Minwu, which is, again, just such a heavy backup we have to deal with. Aerith being another one that's also a 3-drop that we can hit. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Yogg doesn't stop this. Because it cannot be a legal target from Bike, you can freely break their Minwu without having to worry about it. So this is, again, the absolute best card in the set for being able to break their backups, or break Minwu, I guess I should say specifically. It's costed well, it can only hit Minwu, it's not affected by Yogg, and it's a summon so we can play it at any time that we need to. So again, this is probably going to be your best answer to Minwu, but at least there's some other options that I'm kind of trying to highlight in the other elements as well. And then lastly, or I think pretty sure this is the last one, we have Mustadio. Again, calling out break effects are just so important. The one downside is, yes, they have to be dulled. And again, with how prevalent Brave is and how strong, very, very strong of an effect Brave is, that is an issue from time to time. But again, if they have a forward that's kind of beating up on you and you have a way to dull it, or maybe it has to naturally dull, you can at least then play Mustadio, break it, and then your opponent has to try to find another big 8, 9, 10k guy to put into play. So again, not the best answer, but at least it's another answer in the element that you can use if you're building your deck in something to consider that, hey, I really need to save this Mustadio for, say, their 9k that they're going to play, just so I can get rid of it and, take a couple more turns to find the cards I need to find to answer what their game plan is. If we're focused on the elements and we're focused on Earth, how can directly answer Minwu for the backup, then we have to give it to Lightning, the element, specifically for its ability to deal with forwards. Lightning has an absurd number of ways to break forwards, which again is extremely, extremely important in turning the tides in our favor and really addressing their high threat targets. And again, this starter 6-drop Tidus was way better than I had thought. If you're able to give him Brave and he's a 9k with protection from Minwu, and if you're playing Maria, he becomes a 10k Brave, that's very, very hard to deal with and something that decks need an answer to. So Big Odin answers that, but let's talk about Baby Odin first. Choose one forward, cost 4 or less, and break it. Now, if you're playing Lightning, you are playing both Odins. Now, I will say that you should be playing 6 of them, 3 of each, but I realize that some aggressive decks might not want to do that. That's your choice, I understand, but I will be playing mostly control decks based around Lightning, so every single deck that I am playing will have 3 and 3 of the Odins. I personally believe that they're just good, and I also personally believe that they should be represented in a lot of the aggro-based decks, but again, we'll see how those aggressive decks shape out in terms of how many of each Odin that they're running. The situation that it says 4 or less is a bit rough, but again, that is killing 75% probably of the forwards that are in the game. So very strong effect. It breaks it. We can play it at instant speed, so we don't have to worry about losing tempo on our own turn. It can really just help swing the tide of battle. Moving on with that, we have the Big Odin, who is also an EX, which is just fantastic. Choose any forward and break it. So no matter what, you are getting to play this card. Again, it costs 7. I understand that. But for its effect, it's perfectly fine that it costs 7. Especially if you're playing a control deck, or if you just get lucky and hit it on EX burst, you're just feeling great. Being able to answer any forward that they play, again, keep in mind if they have Zidane or something, we can't target it, but being able to answer, relatively speaking, any forward that they're going to try to play really helps us combat those decks. And again, doesn't directly answer Minwu, but it does directly answer their number one threat that we're trying to deal with. So if we're being locked down by one card, Odin allows us to play it, take care of that one card, and really kind of keep pushing through those couple points of damage that we need to. Moving on to more breaking effects, and this is just kind of silly how these two come up, is the Gilgamesh. Now there's 2 of them here, but first I put the Morphing Time one. Until end of turn, he doubles its power, gains first strike, and Brave. And then he can attack twice in this turn. So effectively, you're going to be attacking with a 14k double attacker, for lack of a better word, since we don't have it in this game, and he has first strike. I don't know of a world where not even Golem will save them. So I guess if they have Kefka, that's kind of how they get up to 14 if they have a 9k, plus they're using Kefka to trade. But Gilgamesh is going to swing for damage, and he's going to swing through whatever 4 they try to put in front of him. So sometimes, kind of like the idea that we had with Garland, just pushing through for damage is enough. Again, I will concede to the option that it requires you to have another Gilgamesh to discard. So that is a bit of an unfortunate spot to be in, but as you'll see with the next card, it gives us the option to play both Gilgameshes, and Lightning just has so many answers to it in both our spells and both our forwards that it really can help push those decks in our favor. So again, being able to attack for 14k is definitely going to help, but I think what's really, really strong is the next Gilgamesh. Now again, I can see that it has the 2 things going against it. You must be at 4 points of damage, and you must be able to discard another Gilgamesh. Now what's good about this one is that you do have a way to pump his power. Again, it costs 2, so it feels a little bad that we're going to have to potentially pay 4 to make him a 10k so he doesn't die. But his divider effect is very, very strong. It can, again, choosing any forward and breaking it can really help combat those Minwu decks. So again, kind of the line of thinking here is that we get to play the 3-drop Gilgamesh for early attacking and early breaking if we have to. And let's say we use a special effect once, they answer it, they break it, and we're at 4 or 5 points of damage. Then we can play the 4-drop Gilgamesh and say, you know what, you answered him. I have a few more Gilgamesh in the deck, and this guy can just break any forward now that I want him to. So surprisingly enough, as much slack as I believe I gave Gilgamesh in the set review, if you're seeing a Minwu heavy field, this can absolutely swing it in your favor and really give you another option to push through for that damage. So kudos to Gilgamesh for kind of getting the job done. Probably not the candidate we needed, but definitely the hero we kind of needed to push through. Talking about more, again, kind of situational, but just so good that they break a card, because that's a common theme that we need. Seymour comes in and breaks any 3 cost or less forward. Again, kind of, I wish it hit 4 drops, just because that would help us out a little bit more. Some of the key cards that are being played, like Tidus and Light Cloud and a few others. Tifa is another one that we really need to, interact with as well. But just the fact that he comes in and can break any 3 cost or less. Like if he's breaking a Delita, let's say that they're playing a Delita Minwu deck and they have a 9k 3-drop that we just have to do something about, Seymour can break it. So it does have the opportunity to have that flexibility. And again, just having multiple cards that say break this or break that, we can kind of sculpt our deck and decide, okay, if I play Seymour this turn, I can play Big Odin on the next turn and answer that other guy. So it helps you sequence your turns and give you multiple options. So that's always a good spot to be in and gives us more versatility in our deck building and gives us some more options. As I mentioned earlier with Bahamut, 10,000 is kind of just a good number, at least in my testing, to be in. So Lulu's Thundaga ability, now again, you have to use her special, and unfortunately because she's a backup, we can't tutor for her off Brother, but it deals 10,000 damage to something. Now again, if you're playing a lightning control based deck, or if you're playing a more mid-rangey, grindy kind of lightning deck, you're probably already playing some number of this card. Again, I just felt that it was worth mentioning because having 10k damage can really help break off that last little bit, or it really does kill 99.9% of the cards and interactions that you're going to come across. So anytime that you're able to get a guaranteed break, I'll use parentheses because there are some realm of possibilities where it doesn't work, but being able to blast something for 10k is absolutely worth mentioning, and Lulu does exactly that, and she's just overall a very good backup to be playing. Moving on to water, we had some more interesting options, and Cloud of Darkness is a card that I've been having mixed feelings about. It's a good card, don't get me wrong. I still hate the fact that it's a 7k. I wish it was an 8k. I realize that would have made it too good, but I wish it did anyways. When she enters the field, each player selects 1 forward, so it doesn't have to be Cloud of Darkness. You can choose any other card you want, and all those forwards are put in. All the other forwards are put into the break zone. So again, kind of a key wording here. Some cards will say when they're destroyed, gain X. she places them into the break zone. Now, we don't have the comprehensive rule at this specific time of this recording, but the way that's worded, those abilities wouldn't trigger. Now, that's something that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out with the comprehensive rules. And I'm horribly drawing a blank about which cards specifically dealing with break, but I do remember someone pointing out that there are a few cards that specifically say when it's broken and goes from field to break zone, that they do get something. So Cloud of Darkness kind of does get around that, and again, it's just a great way if your opponent, very much like the Final Fantasy X deck that I played, I want to be playing Tidus, Riku, and Pain all at the same time. If they play Cloud of Darkness, sure, I'm going to get to keep my Tidus, but I kind of want to keep that guy in backup, so it forces me to go down to what I had, and I think in almost every game I was able to set up a Zidane, Tidus, Riku, Pain team, and Zidane was kind of that he's going to always kind of get under and push for damage if we need to. Pain and Riku could party attack if they really had to, and then Tidus was just a great card to push through for damage. So having Cloud of Darkness as an option allows you to kind of break up their field and leave them with only one forward, which can then help you kind of rebuild. And if they've overextended, it can heavily punish them, and they might not have the opportunity to get back into that game for a couple turns. And then what we have Waka, which his base attack is not bad. 4-drop AK, pretty good spot to be in. And then when he attacks, choose one forward you control until end of turn it gains plus 1,000 power for each forward you control. So it's kind of a nice way to boost up one of your guys and kind of punch through their damage. Now, again, I will admit, yes, this is in water. Yes, you're probably playing Minwu yourself, but if you're playing water, the mirror is something that you have to consider. You just can't think that, oh, my opponent's playing water, they're not going to have Minwu. Sure, there are some games where that might happen, but if two water decks are going against each other, you kind of need to have these cards that are going to trump your other opponent's cards. So we have Status Reel. Choose one forward until end of turn. It loses all of its abilities, and its power becomes 1,000. So again, regardless of what they're doing, it's only 1,000 power at that point. Chances are it's going to die. And again, if we're playing, let's say, Wind Water, we can then play Brother. It can help us tutor up extra Wakas, so we can really use this ability when we need to. And it's great just to be able to get more of those cards out of our deck for the effect. Again, there is going to be a heavy focus on how to interact with forwards, because this is a very aggressive game that I've been finding out. And there are limited ways to interact with Minwu directly, but Waka absolutely offers some utility in terms of ways that we can deal with it and ways that we can kind of beat up their forwards and make them a 1,000 power so we can defeat them in combat. So I definitely think that's something that's worth mentioning and really is a great asset to Waka. Then getting into our last two cards here, we have Light Cloud. Again, Brave, 8k, overall good stats. And then, of course, he has Omni Slash, choose one forward and break it. Again, keeping in mind that we had Jesse, we have two other versions of Cloud that we can play. We've been finding out Cloud can just spam Omni Slash in some games, and he can really just push through for the damage himself. Again, keeping in mind, Cloud can declares an attacker, or enter combat, declares an attacker before your opponent has a chance to block. Play Omni Slash to dull him, and he is still attacking. At least, should all the rules hold up, that's how it should work. So that is a very, very strong effect to be in with it itself. So Cloud is always here to kind of push through the damage. And again, it's very easy to just play him in a deck and give him plus 1,000 power. Or if you're playing Earth, you can play Golem and give him the power boost that way. Cloud really does have a lot going for it, and he got a lot of love in the first set compared to some of his other cards. And then lastly, we have Sephiroth. When he enters the field, choose one backup and break it. Now again, this is the only other kind of card that absolutely answers Minwu. But again, it kind of has the same drawback that Archer does. If they have Yag in play, or Yag, however you say his name, and you're trying to play Sephiroth, you have to kill their dummy backup first before you can target Minwu. But ultimately, I have been very, very happy with this card in playing it in my... I traditionally play slower decks, in case you haven't watched the other videos. But Sephiroth is absolutely insane. And having First Strike can just hold off so many decks. And again, if you're playing Maria and you can pump him up to a 9k First Strike, God, I cannot wait till there's some way to give him Brave. If you watch our duel series from yesterday for the Final Fantasy VII versus Final Fantasy X duel series, if you're watching this later, I was able to play a turn 2 Sephiroth, and I had Aerith in field to protect him, and I literally won the game on the back of having a 9k first strike defense against an aggressive deck, and then it just allowed me to set up my combo, and then I was just protected for the rest of the game. And again, it felt great because I had an Aerith in hand the entire time. So even if he tried to play an Alexander, or if he was trying to, kind of combat through Sephiroth and 2-for-1 him if they had, if he had to, I was just going to go, nope, Planet Protector, my guys are now protected, your spell's just going to fizzle, or your Omni Slash, I can just counter that. I was definitely worried. There was one turn where he could have answered it, but Aerith is definitely a huge help for these decks for Sephiroth and a great way to protect them. So that's all I have for this video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. Again, I know there's been a lot of talk about Minwu, so I kind of wanted to address all the different options that we have to combat him. I definitely do not think that he should be banned. I personally feel I haven't found any card yet that is just absolutely game-breaking. Keeping in mind, Square Enix has been doing this for 6 years now, and they've actually had all this time to play test these cards and kind of rebalance them. That's why we see Sephiroth at 8 now instead of 7. Shantoto also got a CP increase. There's plenty of cards that have some kind of balance to them. So I think the game is off to a great start. I understand that I might have pushed the topic about how awesome Minwu is. And again, don't get me wrong, card's insane. Card's very, very good. But I hope this video has explained that there are some options to it and that every element at least has one card. Now again, I will completely admit some of these are far superior than others. But in a pinch, it does give you the options to play any element you want and have an answer to it. So thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you liked this video. I will be doing more videos like this if you liked it and just kind of have a card strategy discussion around certain things, especially if we see one card that's everyone's kind of talking about it. It's taking over all the tournaments and at least calling out the options of what are available. So let me know what you guys liked about this video. Let me know if you want to see more videos like this, more in-depth card discussion, or let me know if you think I was just completely off base on some of these. Again, we're all trying to learn this game. I'm doing these videos just to try to get content out there, get more people talking about it, get people excited about playing the game, and I really just want to keep pushing this game and just how great it is, and I want everyone to come together and enjoy this game. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Give the video a share or a thumbs up. We absolutely appreciate that, and we will see you on the next Six Sages Gaming talk, late night talk, whatever you want to call this, card evaluation, and we'll catch you next time. Have a good one.